University, and I'm talking to Dr. Suzanne Turner, who is, you're a British Academy postdoctoral fellow, aren't you?
Yes,
at Reading University. And I'm going to be asking her about Attic grave stelae, which were the subject of her PhD, and you're writing a book on them now, is that right?
I am, actually, yes.
Great! So what are grave stelae?
Well, grave stelae have absolutely nothing to do with stealing from graves.
Okay.
A stele is a relief monument. In fact, actually, it doesn't even have to carry an image on it. A stele is kind of any standing slab of stone, really.
Right.
But the ones that I'm interested in are the ones that carry figural images, the ones that carry like sculpted pictures, I suppose, of people, for all intents and purposes.
And so they mark the site of burials, was it, rather than cremations?
Yeah, it's mostly in the classical period, it's inhumations, so people are being buried in plain stone sarcophagi rather than being cremated. What
kind of things do they show on them?
The grave stelae come in all different shapes and sizes, so we've got kind of really little ones that might be like that big, and the littler ones that are like less expensive tend to have a little window of relief. So it's like framed within it. It's like looking through a window.
And do they have inscriptions on them as well?
Yeah, mostly they don't. I mean, they don't have very long inscriptions, but a lot of them have just name inscriptions and things like that. So often you'll be told the name of the figures, perhaps who their father is, and which dean they come from. But as well as the little tiny ones that are carved in like really low relief, I think they're really cute, actually. I love those ones. We also have like really big, massive ones that are like life-size or almost life-size.
Wow.
So really kind of enormous ones. And some that are, there are a few examples where they're no longer relief anymore. So the figures are actually carved freestanding and then placed within an architectural frame. So they're a really big.
So you could actually lift the figures out of them almost, could you?
They'd probably be a bit heavy.
Yeah. That would be grave stealing.
Yeah, so they come in kind of big, in lots of different varieties, I suppose, and they really do survive in absolutely enormous numbers as well. I mean, literally in their thousands.
What can these monuments tell us about Athenian society?
Absolutely lots, of course. These monuments are set up for the passer-by to make very strong statements about social status and identity and conformity and things like that. And that's what people have tended to focus on when they've talked about them. But of course, they're also funerary monuments, and it's much more difficult in some ways to explain the full significance of a family group where, for instance, you can't tell exactly who's dead from the perspective of the passer-by. And so I think it's really important to remember that the monuments aren't just designed with very cold calculations of social structure in mind. These are monuments that are put up when people are grieving and mourning. And they're ritual monuments in a sense. And so when people go and perform funerary ritual at the gravesite, they do things like, instead of laying flowers like we do, they tie ribbons and hang things from the tombstones. So the tombstones themselves become an important part of the ritual action. And of course, if you walk along the street and you see a tombstone with ribbons on it, you know that someone's been there really recently. And because they're up above your heads, I mean, dependent upon what time of day, which isn't really very clear, that people are performing these rituals, these visits, and some of them are presumably formal things that you have to do at certain times of year, and others must be much more informal, like we would perhaps go and visit graves. That you'll be able to see the people doing that as well. So the ritual action itself and the continued participation with the monument and with the dead, mediated through the monument, is on display as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I think, you know, these family groups, one way of understanding them, particularly because there's enough evidence to suggest that we're not just looking at representations of people that have died, we're looking at, in these images, at least when they first go up, representations of the living alongside the dead, which is why it's so hard to tell apart who's living and who's dead. So, and over time, because these are things that stand for 3 generations or 2 generations, the people who are mourning will change as more people are born and more people die, and more people will be buried. So perhaps 20 years later, more of the people represented will be in the ground and commemorated by the monument, rather than visiting it and performing ritual there. So we can see these family groups, and they really are very intimate family groups. You know, there's lots of touching, lots of kind of hands on arms. lots of shaking hands. That's
Yeah,
a
I've seen
really
that a few
important
times.
motif. So
What does that mean then, that symbol?
It's called dexiosis. And I mean, it's not like in the Roman world, when you see a handshake, we often interpret it as marriage, don't we?
Yeah.
And dexiosis on the tombstone seems to carry more connotations of equality and unity. So harmony, unity in the family in the face of death.
And is it the dead person that's shaking the hands?
Probably one of them is, but it doesn't necessarily have to be, especially because over time they're both going to be dead anyway, and the monument will still be standing. But what it really emphasises is that the cohesion of that social group, the family, in the face of death is really important. And so they're represented as, I mean, it's almost a denial of death in a sense when you think about it, because the dead wind up looking just like the living. But it links the dead and the living together. And so we can see the family groups on the monuments as mirroring the family groups that are performing ritual around the grave, because it's the family who has responsibility for funerary ritual. And so in a sense, I suppose I'd like to see them as quite organic, that the real people standing around the grave extend the group on the monument and vice versa, and you get this kind of mirroring effect, which is all layered up as more of the figures on the scene die, and so there's a real continuity there.
It sounds like there's so much more you can get out of them than just the plain old sort of art historical, chronological style.
Or just looking at gender, and there's a lot of work on gender on them, which of course, you know, has huge value. And the reason that there's a lot of work on gender is because there are so many of them. I mean, they're in their thousands, but also because there are lots of women on them. I mean, the numbers are really striking. And it's Robin Osborne that has done the number crunching, but that 50% of the grave stele represent both gendered groups, so men and women together. But 20% represent just male figures, so either solo men or
groups of men, yeah.
And the remaining 30% represent only female figures, which means that not only that there are more solo gender groups, as it were, single gender groups
of
that
women,
are women
yeah,
than there are of men, but it also means that women appear on 80% of these monuments, and this is in a culture where, you know, we're constantly being told by text, you know, the Athenian voice from legal texts in particular is that women are hidden away in the house, they can't come out of the house, and also that their name shouldn't be spoken in public. It's not just that men shouldn't see them, it's that they shouldn't even know their name, but they are named on the grave stele and they're highly visible. So, you know, the reason why people want to talk about gender with them is because this lets us access not just women, but also, of course, it's women conforming to social ideals. They're normative representations of gender in that sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, you know, they are a fantastic corpus for thinking about things like gender, but that's not all there is.
Thank you very much for telling us about your work on grave stele, and looking forward to reading your book. Has it got a title yet?
No, I can't decide what to call it.
That's the hardest bit.
Answers on a postcard.
Yeah, that and the front cover. Which one's going to be on the front cover?
But how much choice do you have over that? I don't
know. But anyway, whatever it looks like, whatever it's called, we're really looking forward to reading about it. And next time you appear on Classics Confidential, you'll be talking about viewing the divine.
Yes,
Attic Creative Relief.
Moving from viewing the dead to viewing the divine.
Till next time.
Till next time.